Hey guys, it's TheFrXion here, or Tiger Tank 12, how you wanna call me, I don't really care. And today, we're taking a look at the most sought after tank destroyer since the Waffenträger of E100, the Strv 103B, the tier 10 Swedish tank destroyer. And this tank, well, I don't even know how to put it into words. I actually have a video, or I will put this into this video, actually into this preview, where you can see the amazing capacities that this tank has, the amazing armor, and how good this tank is in siege mode. So before we get into this whole stuff, if you don't know what siege mode is pretty much a new mode for 3 vehicles, the top 3 Swedish tank destroyers, including this one as it is tier 10, which allows you to switch in between travel and siege mode. And siege mode is a mode where you go hull down with this vehicle and you have the full control over this hydropneumatic suspension, which allows you to raise and lower your tank and get really crazy angles with this vehicle. And with this siege mode, you're getting an increase of, I think, 100% in DPM, which puts this tank on, I think it is the highest, it is the tank with the highest DPM in the game, with 4,500, I think, in siege mode, and the best accuracy and best aim time for tier, or pretty much for any tank in the game. So if that is not something that is amazing, well, I don't know. If you add the mobility to the tank, you're getting a amazing tank that might just completely fuck up the balancing of World of Tanks tier 10 and anything below that, tier 9 and tier 8. The gun, if you look at the gun right here, this is a fixed gun, so pretty much you have no gun arc. You cannot put the gun up or down. That is what the siege mode is for, and we'll get to that later on in the game. But before we're going to be showing any kind of gameplay or any kind of tests from the armor and the pen of the gun, we will take a look at this beautiful tank. This model is really amazingly done. I think all the Swedish tanks that they have released, of course, all of them are HD tanks, and all of them look stunning. And this is probably, I think, the most famous Swedish tank, since it's still in their arsenal. They, I think they have switched it out now for the Leopard 2, but I think they still own some of these bad boys. So, the next step is that we're going to be comparing this vehicle to 5 other turretless tank destroyers, actually 2 times Object 268. We're going to be adding the Object 263. Now, we're going to be closing all of these points right here, and we're going to be taking a look at the firepower. If you look at the points that Wargaming distributes to all the different vehicles, you can see that the Object 263 actually has the highest amount of points. Now, obviously, all the calibers on these tanks vary. You have the Strv 103B. This vehicle is running a 105mm gun. This is very unlikely for a tier 10 tank destroyer to be running such a small caliber gun. And if you look at it right here, all the other tanks have a caliber of 100, and I think I have to check the Object 263. I think the Object 263 has a caliber of 130 or 120 millimeters. Obviously not 105 millimeter. And that is already considered 130 millimeters, and that is already considered a rather small caliber gun. Now, the Forge 155 is a 155mm gun. The E3 obviously has a 155mm gun as well. The Object 268 has a 155mm gun too, and the Jagdpanzer E100, I think that is a 170mm gun. I don't own the tank yet, but yeah, 170mm gun. That thing is pretty much doing the highest alpha damage. Now we're just gonna close that real fast. If you look at the standard shell damage, you're pretty much looking at 2, 3, 400 damage drop off. Max damage on this vehicle is 488 damage, and if you look at the highest alpha damage of certain tanks of the Jagdpanzer E100, that is more than 4 times the lowest damage you can get on the Strv 103B. But that doesn't really matter, because you have, with the APCR rounds, which are the standard rounds for this tank, also there are premium APCR rounds for this vehicle, you have 303 millimeters of pen. We can show you that real fast. If we take a look at the gun, you have 308 millimeters of pen. That's enough to go through any vehicle in the game. And if you just feel you don't have enough pen, you can rely on 350 millimeters of pen. But I think that increase of 42 millimeters of pen is not that important, as you are at 308 millimeters of pen. That's enough to penetrate any tank. So, rate of fire, 6.7 rounds per minute. Obviously, this is not in siege mode. If you are in siege mode, that amount increases drastically. The reload time is 8.9 seconds on my tank right now. Now, imagine we're not using all the skills. There are only three crew members. We have a gun rammer installed here. We have improved ventilations, and we're not running brothers in arms. We're not running a premium consumables, so we could bunch that number up or down in that case a lot more. And this is not siege mode. This is just standard travel mode. In siege mode, that gets really interesting. Now, obviously, oh my god, I have to close the all again. Obviously, the gun traverse speed is also coupled with the track traverse speed, because this gun is in a fixed position, so you have track traverse speed afterwards. If we take a look at mobility, track traverse speed of 37.18 degrees per second. That is obviously better than any other of these tanks. Then we will take a look at the gun depression and elevation angles. I'm not sure if this is the siege mode variant, but in siege mode you are able to actually lift your tank or elevate your entire tank. You have to do that if you want to shoot a tank above you, and actually depress the gun to be shooting at vehicles that are below you, or just to angle your armor correctly. Now the dispersion, this is the best dispersion at the tier, 0.29. If you're in siege mode, it gets even better. So siege mode is what it's all about. Survivability, on the other hand, it has the lowest amount of hit points with 1,700. A hull armor on the front of 40 millimeters, 30 millimeters on the side, and 30 on the rear. Now that sounds like, what the heck is this tank? Like 40 millimeters on the front, that's like no armor at all. Like, what the hell? But what you're missing here is that this tank has the best angling I've ever seen on a tank in World of Tanks. And I say that a lot now. The Kranwagen has amazing angles, but the Kranwagen is not invincible. This tank is in the right spot with siege mode activated, invincible to certain tanks, or pretty much to certain rounds. If you think you can penetrate this tank with premium rounds, heat rounds, well, what if this angle is so good? Yeah, I'm just gonna fire heat rounds. Those are probably gonna go through the tank anyhow. You have a heat round grid right here. This grid is going to stop anything, this grill. It's gonna stop all the heat rounds, and it works perfectly. So if you want to shoot this tank, even with high explosive rounds, you have to get over these grids. And the only possible way of penetrating this tank frontally, if it's in siege mode, is pretty much that commander's hatch right there. And it's this little spot there, this little freaking spot. I've tried that out. It is so hard to penetrate this tank in siege mode. And that is one of the problems that I have. This tank pretty much is the best camper tank you can have. If you get concealment up, if you get like a freaking bino into this tank, and you get to the right spot, there's no artillery, you are in heaven. This tank is gonna withstand any shots. except if you angle it weirdly. If you're not in siege mode, travel mode is the mode that is the most dangerous for this tank, because you are very vulnerable. This lower plate right here, if you're in travel mode, is very, very vulnerable, so people can penetrate your lower plate. But if you're in siege mode and you hide your lower plate, or you're at that angle where the rounds just cannot penetrate you, because if you look at the angle, it's so hard to go through there. Your upper plate is going to be safe, except for that little viewport right there, but a lot of the times you just get 0 damaging shots, unfortunately. So this is really a case of go around the tank and fuck it up from the side or from the behind. Because in siege mode, every time you have to change the modes, you have to wait 2.5 seconds. And those 2.5 seconds are the most vulnerable situations you can find yourself in this tank. And that is one of the things you have to get around to. You have to learn how to use the siege mode correctly. And that is one of the reasons, one of the problems that I have. Siege mode actually doesn't take a lot of time to get used to, but it takes a lot of time to perfect it. And that is one of the things that I'm really bad at. So if we take a look at the survivability, the 310 points that Wargaming distributes this tank is not really correct. The 735 points on the Jagdpanzer E100 are nothing compared to this angling of this tank. In siege mode and the right position, this tank is invincible. And with 308 millimeters of pen, it can go through the upper plate of the Jagdpanzer E100, the flat surface there, without a problem. So we're getting to mobility. This tank also weighs the least amount of tons. Is one of the fastest, also going backwards. This tank can go backwards at 45 kilometers. You can drive backwards and shoot at the enemies, but obviously in travel mode you do not have the luxury of like a turret or a gun arc. You can only shoot at fixed positions, so if a tank is right behind you and the tank is not like above you or below you, you can actually shoot at him. So that's quite funny. The specific power horsepower to ton ratio is very, very good, with 18.11 horsepower per ton, and you have a really good traverse speed. So the switch mode right here, switching to siege mode takes you 2.5 seconds, and switching back to travel mode takes you 2 seconds. This is one of the things you have to keep in mind. Be careful when you're switching in between those modes. If you're caught like switching the mode while somebody is going past you and you switch right to siege mode in that moment, you're pretty much done for. It's like they caught you with your pants down. Concealment on this vehicle. Well, concealment is pretty damn good. I have tried that out with a friend in a test server. This will all be added afterwards. Before we're gonna go into the games, we'll add this little test server footage where you can see just how good this tank is hidden in certain positions. Now, spotting, the vehicle is not the best at spotting. It has the lowest view range, and it needs to have the lowest view range, because if this tank would have the best view range in the game, just imagine, it has really good concealment, good spotting, it has amazing armor, amazing firepower. Like, this firepower is amazing that this tank has, especially in siege mode. You can't do anything against this vehicle. And that is one of the things you have to keep in mind. This vehicle right here at the moment is so strong in a lot of points that a lot of people are calling it OP, and I do have to jump on that train as well. I'm calling it right now. I'm not calling it OP, but I'm calling it a little bit too good. And that is pretty much almost an understatement. So, I would say we'll take a look at the test footage and test server footage, and I'll show you guys just how good the survivability of this tank is, and just how good the camo rating on this vehicle is also. The first shot is going to be on the travel mode of the Strv 103B. As you can see right there, you can easily penetrate the lower plate there. Now my friend has switched over to the siege mode, and you can see how difficult it is to actually penetrate any part of the tank. If you look closely right there, you cannot penetrate the lower plate. It's impossible at this angle. and I'm loading 8 PCR rounds that have a pen of 303 millimeters. And you can see right there that commander's hatch on the right side is not a reliable source to penetrate the tank. You can actually damage a module, but you are not able to do any damage. As you can see right there, the problem that you have is also that if the guy right here, we managed to penetrate the one point that is very crucial to know, and that is the commander's hatch. But if you look at all the other spots, it is pretty much impossible to go through this vehicle. It's really difficult. Now, if you look at the grill, which stops heat rounds, that is also an added disadvantage for the player who is shooting at the tank, because if you look closely at it, it can actually even bounce or hold off shots that actually go through. I think just heat rounds, but that is more than enough. Now, as you can see, trying to pen the cupola is not really that efficient most of the time, and we are at a range of 74 meters. Now this is going to be changed anytime now, and we're going to be setting him back, I think, 200 something meters. And you can see I'm just trying to find a spot where I can actually penetrate the tank, but the only valid point where I can reliably pen him was the commander's hatch. And right there you can see 269 meters. We have the highest accuracy in the game, the fastest, the highest DPM as well. And you can see finally we managed to take him out after a few shots. And right here you can see that although the armor is really strong, there are certain tanks that are going to be able to penetrate you, and the Jagdpanzer E100 seems to be one of them. So I am in the siege mode, and right now I'm just facing him. I'm not doing any fancy angling stuff, and I think he's gonna put one very nice shot right away into my lower plate, and that is very surprising. He actually hit the part of my shovel, and I think it had to do with my angling that he was able to actually penetrate my tank and do damage to me. Now the second shot right here is a little bit more interesting. Actually, if you would have been in an engagement with this tank, you definitely would have been able to take on the Jagdpanzer E100. He actually bounces. I'm not sure where he actually shot me, but he actually bounces off our tank, and you can see just how effective this armor is, even against such a tank as the Jagdpanzer E100. But still, this tank does seem to get a few shots in from time to time, which is actually absolutely needed. And here he actually manages to penetrate us and kill us with that shot. And he actually told me that he hit our gun and went through the gun mantlet. So in this game I'll show you guys the full capabilities, the capacity this tank possesses, just how good this tank can actually be. And we're gonna tone down the volume a little bit so you guys can hear me better. I'm just gonna hit F3. Oh, excuse me. Because I want to see if my free camera mod actually works. Unfortunately it does not, but that's not that important right now. So we're playing on Radshire in this tank, and we will be sitting on top of the tank destroyer hill, a place that all tank destroyers truly love. And you can see right there we switched from the travel mode right over to the siege mode, and that's how fast you can actually just engage an enemy tank. 2.5 seconds, and then you're ready to go, and you can aim at anything that's on the other side. Now I would really like to show you guys the freaking suspension that you have right here. How you have this gun depression, how you're looking down there, and that this pretty much in this state your tank is almost, well, invincible. Right now it's the travel stage again because I've spotted some tanks over there, and I decided to, you know what, screw it, this is the test server, play a little bit more aggressively. So let's see how well this tank does deliver when it's in a mid to long range engagement. So we're not going to be running into some ambush right there, but right here you can just see how incredibly good this tank is in these sniper scenarios. We have the E4 right there with our siege mode, and with the freaking DPM of 4,400 damage, we're obviously able to take out a big chunk of that E4. Unfortunately, the E4 right there gets behind cover, and we're unable to actually shoot him much longer. There is a object 140, but we're not ready to engage him. Unfortunately, we can't turn around fast enough, and right there we have some nice juicy targets. And with the 300 millimeters of pen, all these tanks shouldn't be any problem for us, except for that Kranwagen. And of course, in this gameplay, we're also going to be covering how this tank actually fares against vehicles that are trying to flank it. And if you're in travel mode, you'll just see how big of a problem this fixed gun can be for you. But that comes later on. So right here, you can actually see that we're holding this place right now pretty nicely. And this Swedish 155 right there is coming out again. And we have all the time that we need to shoot him. We have the reload time of 5.2 seconds, I think. Unfortunately, right there, we actually bounced 2 shots. We bounced 3 shots from the Kranwagen, 1 from the Object 140, and we take 1 big hit by the E4 right there to our commander's hatch, the big weak spot. And that is really difficult to actually hit. Right there, you can just see how fast you can actually fall back with this tank. 45 kilometers per hour on the throttle. And that is pretty damn nice, if you ask me. So we spot T-34, we change over to the siege mode, and you can see how slowly you move up. You have maximum of 5 kilometers per hour to actually move up. But we're still able with this DPM to take out the T-34 before he's able to go back into cover. The next target is already coming up, and it's the FV215B, and you can just see how beautiful the accuracy is first off with that flick shot, and how beautiful the reload time is. I mean, the DPM is astonishing. And right here we actually make a big mistake. We go over the ridge line, try to get on to this object 416, and the object 416 actually penetrates us, and he hits our gun part right in the middle. It was a heat round actually, and right here there are things you have to keep in mind. Like if a vehicle is below you, you can actually get the grid up so they can only shoot your grid, but you have to be careful of all the people who can actually shoot your lower plate right there. So as you can see right here, we've lost a lot of our allies. So I decided to fall back, you know, get into a little bit more defensive position where the guys can't immediately outflank me. So I get into this ditch over here, and then I deploy the siege mode. And you can see with the mobility that you have with this vehicle, it's actually quite nice. You can get all over the place and still respond to the certain scenarios that might just happen. And we are at 426 HP, that's not a lot HP left, but we spot a Kranwagen. A very, very strong Swedish tier 10 heavy tank. He actually manages to put 1 into us, we managed to put 2 into him. He does 0 damage to our cupola there, and that is one of the things that you can get used to. People doing 0 damage to your cupola. And right there you can see we bounce a shot of the E4, giving us the pretty much damage bounce total of 2,270 and 6,000 damage done right there. And that is pretty much a thing you can expect from this tank with this sort of DPM, that you can actually deal so much damage to tanks. And I know that the Kranwagen is going to come up from the side trying to engage me, and I actually should have deployed the siege mode right here, but I decided against it because I wanted to test out how good this tank can actually engage tanks in its travel mode. And you can see with the travel mode, with the 37 degrees per second track traverse, we're able to actually keep the front of our tank to him. He cannot penetrate us, He's on reload, and the problem right here for us though is that the gun is stationary. You cannot elevate or depress the gun. You cannot move it to left and right. You have to move your turret, and this is as pretty much as if your tank, as if you're driving a heavy tank or a medium tank with a destroyed turret. You cannot aim anywhere else, and you can see how easily he actually just took care of us by ramming us, and that's just one of the things you have to worry about. And keep in mind, when you're playing this tank, the travel mode is just for traveling, except if you're behind a vehicle or let's say you have the vehicle in front of you, and you can pin him to a point and you have enough pen to just take him on. But you could see right there we were struggling against Kranwagen because the Kranwagen has such good turret armor, and we were unable to penetrate that tank frontally with this kind of mode. So obviously you have to keep your distance in this vehicle. This vehicle is not for close range engagements. It was not built, it was not meant to be. This is a sniper tank. It is an amazing sniper tank that if it gets spotted, unless there's already, nothing can really hurt it if they do not like get lucky and hit your cupola, or if they all aim for your cupola. This is the one big weak spot that you have right now. No other weak spot on this vehicle currently, as I can see, in at least in siege mode. This vehicle is amazing, and we're gonna be looking at one more game where you can actually see how well this tank can fare in certain situations where there's no artillery, where you have people shooting this tank, and where you can return fire with this 300mm of pen that you have. And you can actually see how the travel mode also affects this tank, and how you can actually even use it to your advantage. So we'll jump to the next game right now. So actually, before we get to that game that I had on Murovanka, I just wanted to show you guys the limits of the siege mode on this vehicle. That was my very first game in this tank, actually on the day that it was released, and you can actually see how good of a tank it is and where the limitations to this vehicle pretty much are. We're just gonna speed this up a little bit until we get to the right position. We're playing on the map Paris. This map right here is pretty nicely made, we can say that. And you can see just right here, we actually managed to flank these guys with this tank. So we get into the siege mode and we easily take care of that 113. 3 shots in very rapid succession, and very, very easy damage dealt. And right here you can see, I don't know how that Grille didn't penetrate us or hit us, but if that shot would have hit us, it would have done a lot of damage to us. So we're just gonna be moving back, and you can see just how good this vehicle was, or is still. That was the very first day, the very first few hours that the beta was released. That guy did not know where to shoot this tank, and I wiggled it around a little bit and he shot my track and he was unable to do any damage. So right here, this is what I'm talking about the limitations of this vehicle. We're gonna be going up against the huge numbers of tanks, and we're fairly close. I mean, now obviously this tank almost feels like a gun placement, right? Like a big ass gun that is, or a bunker that is really well protected. But unfortunately right there you can see that although we have the rate of fire right here, and we have the amazing armor, there are limitations to this vehicle. You can see how easily, with a large numbers of tanks, they can just outmaneuver us. And because of the siege mode, we're unable to dash out of this area. So I would have needed to get right back into the travel mode and just fall back, because this AMX 5120 decided to go around me and he had an easy snack. And that is one of the things you need to keep in mind. We did do 3,000 damage, and we did bounce 2,580 damage, but still, this tank is not a brawler. That is one of the things you need to remember. So let's jump to the other game to finally assess the situation and give a final verdict to this vehicle. So, this game on Murovanka was my second pretty much game in this vehicle. And I did hear a lot about the siege mode, and I heard that this vehicle, with the angling of its armor, has one of the toughest pretty much hulls to crack. So I decided to test that feature of this vehicle. And Murovanka is one of the maps, if there is no artillery, there are some very nice spots where you can go hull down as a tank destroyer, but these spots are very difficult to hold, especially if you're a tank destroyer with not enough armor. For example, ISU 152, so you have to pretty much rely on your camo capacity and ability to stay hidden, because once you're lit, you're pretty much a target for everyone. I'm talking about the spot at C1 or D1, this little hill over here. With the siege mode, you're actually able to use this little hill area to your advantage and snipe all the guys that are hiding at J1, H1, and pretty much the entire J area down to J3. And this means you're gonna be able to engage all the guys that are coming over around that corner. And you can see right here, first target we go up against the Kranwagen, and a very stupid decision by me. Don't shoot the Kranwagen at its turret. That tank is so OP. And very, very quickly I realized that I did some fairly stupid things right here. I actually decided to give them my side armor on the Stridswagen, and that is one of the things you do not want to do. Right here, very stupidly, I'm shooting a Strv 103B from very far away, 461 meters, and you can see how difficult it is to find the right weak spot to be able to penetrate that tank, as long as it is not turned towards you. And right here, or turned away from you. And right here you can see we're trying to just get some shots off, and there is the accuracy of this tank. Now we're starting to bounce stuff, and you can just see how nice of a shot we just put into that Kranwagen. And we're bouncing stuff left and right, 2100 damage already bounced. And that is just one of the things you want to do in this vehicle. You do have the armor, you do have the angling to do those things, and you have the siege mode. Why not go out there and have some fun, right? So right here you can see the people are... I think this vehicle is going to be very frustrating to play against, especially if you're in a good position. If nobody can pretty much come up to you or flank you, you are to some degree invincible. And you can see 300 millimeters of penetration easily go through the front turret of that vehicle. And that Emil 1, that is the tier 8 version of the Kranwagen, pretty much. They look very similar. The Emil 1 and the Emil 2 and the Kranwagen. They all have very nice guns. I'm not sure if the Emil has the 12 centimeter already, but I know that the predecessor, no, the Emil has the 105 millimeter gun. And you can just see how much damage we have actually bounced there. We have bounced 322 damage, and we have received about 1000 damage. But we have bounced shots from all kinds of calibers. From that Type 5, from the M103, from the Emil, and I decided to, you know what? This is not worth it, sitting back there. You can, with the mobility that you have on this vehicle, go up, move forward, then switch to the very nice safe location right here, back to siege mode, and then you can just annihilate them with your DPM. And from the side, I mean, the Emil 1 has no chance. He's getting annihilated pretty quickly. DPM of 4500. I mean, he doesn't stand a chance. The alpha damage is obviously not that high, but right here you can see just how easily we took care of that Emil. And that is one of the things that you have to just love about this tank. The DPM and its accuracy and its gun handling is amazing. So right here we're actually moving. This is the travel mode, and I decided to use the travel mode to engage these guys. And you can use the travel mode, it's just not very effective. Now obviously if you're playing this tank, you should use the siege and travel mode to both of your advantages. And you can just see what kind of amazing tank this is. This vehicle has such capacities and such great features that it just pretty much puts every other tank destroyer to shame. And that is one of the things that we're worried about. The balancing of World of Tanks kind of relies on the Swedish tanks. How will they come out? This is a test server, obviously, so things are subject to change. And maybe they should make it a little bit more vulnerable, at least at the cupola here and here, that these things actually soak up more damage. Because right now we have bounced a lot of shots on the cupola or 0 damage right there. The only real reliable way to penetrate this tank is when it's in travel mode or when you have the side and the rear of this vehicle. Other than that, you're kind of in a bad position to engage this tank frontally, especially if it's like a big open field. They have their siege mode active and you're driving straight through an open field. They can just tear you up with the freaking reload time of 5 seconds and the alpha damage of about 400 damage per shot. So that is very interesting. So my final verdict for this preview for this vehicle, it is pretty much just like the Kranwagen, absolutely amazing at what it needs to do. Destroying tanks and setting up ambushes. This vehicle is the best, I think, the best tank destroyer out there right now. That makes us kind of all worried because the balancing is at stake right here. Now, do I like the vehicle? I do like to play this vehicle. Mobility wise, gun handling wise, armor wise, this is just so much fun. The siege mode is a very nice new addition, and I think I'm very excited for the Swedish tanks when they are coming, and I think a lot of people are excited about this tank. So I would like to hear you guys' opinion about this tank. Do you think it's OP? Do you think it's balanced enough with the siege mode? Since the siege mode and travel mode do put you at a disadvantage at certain positions. But how do you think this tank will fare in a live server? So yeah, I'll see you guys on the next video. Next video will probably be about, I don't know, the Emil 2 or at least the other TheFrXion. And yeah, I'll see you guys on that.